Bob Arum ethers UFC president Dana White, says he would never last in the boxing game. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel for the latest and greatest in boxing. If you want to become part of the gang, notification gang, please hit the bell icon. Shout out to the super chats, channel donations, the Venmo donations, the Cash App, and the Patreon family. We working. Sign up for ESPN Plus bundle. ESPN Plus, Hulu, and Disney Plus, all three apps. $12.99, and it does help the channel when you guys click on that link. Everybody's locked down and forced to stay at home on this quarantine, so if you need some content, check that out. $12.99 for all three of those apps, and again, it does help the channel. Now, Bob Arum, he's celebrating like 50 plus years in the business, and he's done several interviews recently, and he talked about Dana White and the UFC. He's said a lot of stuff, and Dana White at one point was saying he was coming to bring his own brand or his own spin on boxing. He said he was going to get in the boxing business with UFC partners and make Zuffa boxing. And it was supposed to happen, I think, last October. He said he had some deal that he's working on with Floyd Mayweather, and we haven't heard much. Recently, Dana White did an interview, and he said something to the effect of he has to reconsider now. You know, he's kind of getting cold feet. He said he looked at the numbers and boxing is just effed up. You know, he said something really close to that. It's just effed up and the numbers don't really make sense. So he may not even, make this transition. Well, not transition, but this dual role, and he might just focus on UFC, right? Bob Arum has also criticized Dana White, his insistence to make the UFC 249 fight happen. Now, many of you guys know that Khabib Nurmagomedov, he can't leave Russia with this pandemic going on to get to America. They were trying to make UFC 249 that everyone was expecting, Tony El Kukui Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. And, the first time it was scheduled, it got canceled. And it's just like in boxing. You look at Victor Postal versus Jose Ramirez. They were scheduled to fight, and then they was scheduled to fight in China, and then we find out about this Rona stuff, and they canceled the fight. Then they rescheduled it for close to where Jose Ramirez is from, in Fresno, and then the Rona has since spread to America, so they canceled it again. And that's exactly what's happening with UFC 249. Like, they were already scheduled to fight, and I believe Nurmagomedov, he ended up getting ill and dehydrated, so the fight got canceled. Now, with this pandemic, there's travel bans and restrictions, and, you would have to travel with your entourage and your team and all this stuff. And right now, Nurmagomedov is in Russia, so it's not going to happen. And for whatever reason, Dana White is maybe made some promises, and he's trying to salvage UFC 249. Now they're talking about Tony Ferguson still fighting at an undisclosed location against Justin Gaethje. And, that's the latest. I don't know if it's done deal. I don't know what the venue or card is going to be, because it's all under wraps, because most people in most live sporting events have been a no-go, So Bob Arum criticized Dana White for even doing that. Like, basically, you're doing too much. He's saying UFC 249, I don't even understand why you're doing it. It doesn't help his UFC. It doesn't help the company. People are really dying, and you're trying to push the issue. But then he did an interview with CBS Sports State of Combat podcast, and this is what Bob Arum had to say about Dana White. So he's keeping the insults flowing. He said, Dana has been a good promoter for UFC, but UFC is a monopoly. He tells the fighters who they are going to fight and when they are going to fight. He pays them very little against what professional boxers get, so he's a monopolist. And it's not easy for a monopolist to go into a sport like boxing, which is anti-monopolist. Bob Arum continues by saying, we have very little barriers of entry in boxing, and we have a lot of promoters. Everybody is looking to promote the best way that they can for themselves. Dana White could not exist in this type of milieu. He can only exist in an avenue where he is dominant, a monopolistic person where he is manager, promoter, rules maker for the participant, everything. I'm telling you, there's something about the operation of the UFC which is a violation of federal law. You can't do that in boxing because of the Muhammad Ali Act, which, to reasons only known to Dana White, doesn't apply to the UFC. Why? I don't know. The Muhammad Ali Act at least gives rights to fighters, managers, and prevents a monopoly-like situation. End quote. Link in the description. You know, I actually agree with Bob Arum with a lot of what he said. I mean, some of it is you can't even refute. Like the fact that boxers, by and large, you know, a big name boxer for sure is getting paid more than a big name, you know, the average big name UFC guy, just in general. Like I've seen fights where like Devin Alexander and Jesus Sotocaras, and Devin Alexander I think got like 350,000, something like that. And then you see like Amanda Nunes, who is a beast and arguably the greatest female MMA fighter or UFC fighter that the women's MMA has had, and she'll get like 100,000 or 80,000 or something, 50,000. It's just, you know, it's just insane. It's insane. So that part you can't really refute. The pay scale is different, you know. That's why I think Conor McGregor, after he fought Mayweather, he started demanding more from the UFC because he got a taste of some different money messing with Floyd. You know, Floyd was getting 100 million guaranteed paychecks for some of those big fights like Conor McGregor and Manny Pacquiao. And he was getting pay-per-view proceeds on the back end. So he's like, how's the UFC paying me $5 million or so? You know, all the money and all the fame and all the, you know, quotables that I'm dropping for these press conferences. So that's why he started getting the proper 12 endorsement with his whiskey and getting that on the octagon mat and, you know, just a little bit more involvement in the business and equity. So I agree with Bob Arum. You know, boxing is different to the UFC. You know, I don't have a problem with Dana White. He's cool. And the one thing that's good about the monopoly of the UFC is there's no bullshit. The fights get made. You know, when two people are hot and make a name for themselves or have already made a name for themselves and they're doing well for themselves, like let's say Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal was coming off of two exciting knockouts like Darren Till and Ben Askren. Nate Diaz had just made a comeback and looked good against Holloway. Boom, fight was made, BMF, let's get it. So there are some benefits to the monopoly, but it is ultimately different when it comes to boxing because they have the Ali Act. You can't act as a manager and promoter, and you know, there's different rule sets. So I don't know how Dana White would do because he would then have to work with, you know, presumably PBC, Al Heyman, you know, TGB Promotions, maybe Bob Arum, Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya, who he hates, Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, DAZN, different networks. It's totally different. You know, it's a different ball game. Bob Arum's been in the business, as I said, for over 50 years. So he's used to, you know, he knows how to move in a room full of vultures. But Dana White, he wouldn't be used to that. I'm not saying he's incapable, because I was anxious to see what Dana White can do in boxing, because there's elements of the UFC that I like for boxing. Like they do good promo work and promotion to hype up the event and hype trailers and stuff like that. But ultimately it's a different sport, and it sounds like Dana White may be getting cold feet about coming into boxing. So let me know if you agree with Bob Arum. Do you think Dana White will come over? It's just ultimately it's a different ball game. And the other thing is, like, he would have to be forced with different rule sets and Ali Acts, and you know, he'd have to build new relationships with fighters. He's already knows the UFC guys, you know, but he would have to be building relationships with boxers that he may not have existing relationships with. It's just, I think the more he thought about it, the more he looked at what he got going with ESPN and decided to make that his focus. So Bob Arum's kind of right. You know, he's kind of right. You know, the thing, another point that Arum said, and Arum, just so you know, graduated from Harvard. I think he went to New York law school or something. They graduated Harvard. But another good point is, how come boxing has the Ali Act, but the UFC doesn't have anything like that, or they're not covered under the Ali Act, and they're both combat sports. You know, a lot of them happen in Nevada. So boxing is protected worldwide. The Ali Act is federal. You see what I'm saying? So it's protected if you're boxing in New York, you're boxing in Las Vegas, LA. So it's weird that they don't have anything like that to protect the UFC fighters. You know, I don't know. If somebody knows the answer to how a different combat sport, you know, has a total different jurisdiction and they don't have anything like that in place, you know, like the Chuck Liddell Act. Let me know. The Alistair Overeem Act. Let me know what you guys think, and if you have any detail, or if you're a lawyer, anything, let me know in the comment section. Do you agree with Bob Arum? Do you think Dana White's coming to boxing? Drop all that in the comment section. If you love what I'm doing, smash the like button. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, is Ego signing off.
So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxing Ego, the future of boxing.